Good morning, everyone. My name is Arpan Banerjee. I am a doctoral fellow at the Department of East Asian Studies, University of Delhi, and academic counselor here at Ignou. So I welcome you all to today's learning session. So today we'll be starting the paper, Indian Government and Politics, and the code of this paper is BPSC 132. So, before starting the first unit of this paper, let us first discuss the syllabus of this paper. So, in this paper, which is called Indian Government and Politics, the first block which we are going to discuss today is pertaining to approaches to study Indian politics. So herein we are going to discuss three approaches in the three units that are there in this block. So first up, we are going to discuss the liberal approach to study Indian politics, which is what we are going to discuss in today's class. Then in the next class, we are going to discuss the Marxist and the Gandhian approaches to study Indian politics. That is what we are going to discuss in the next class. And then if we talk about the block 2 of this paper, the second block of this paper, it's pertaining to Indian Constitution. We are going to study the Constitution of India, wherein we are going to study the basic features of the Indian Constitution. We're going to study about the fundamental rights. We're going to study about the directive principles of state policy, and also we are going to study about the fundamental duties. So fundamental rights are enumerated in the Constitution from Article 12 to Article 35. That is what we are going to discuss. As part of that, we'll be discussing the right to equality, Article 14. We shall be discussing Article 15, prohibition of discrimination on the basis of religion, race, place of birth, or gender. Then we are going to discuss Article 16 in the fundamental rights that will be pertaining to equality of opportunity in terms of employment. Right. Then we are going to discuss Article 17, which is a very significant part of our fundamental rights pertaining to the abolition of untouchability. Then we are going to discuss the Article 18 of the fundamental rights, which is pertaining to the abolition of titles. Then we are going to discuss in the article, as a part of the fundamental rights, the Article 19, which includes a list of freedoms: freedom of movement, freedom to move freely throughout the country, right? Freedom to settle anywhere. Then freedom to assemble peacefully without arms. Freedom to form associations. That is Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause D. Then there are certain limitations also to this Article 19, which are enumerated in the Clause 2 of Article 19, which were introduced by the First Amendment Act of 1951 after the Ramesh Thapar case, that we are going to discuss. Then we are going to discuss Article 20, that is protection in terms of conviction and arrest, that we are going to discuss. Protection in case of conviction and arrest, that we are going to discuss, wherein a person cannot be forced to be a witness against oneself, and one person cannot be punished twice for the same crime, right? And also the punishment that will be given for a certain crime would be what was there at the time of commitment of the crime, right? So no ex post facto punishment. All these things are there in Article 20. Then Article 21 we are going to discuss as part of the fundamental rights. It's very important. It's pertaining to right to life and personal liberty, and how the Supreme Court has basically expanded the meaning of right to life and personal liberty, and it has expanded it to include the right to a clean environment, clean air and clean environment in Subhash Kumar versus State of Bihar case 1991. The Supreme Court also in Olga Tellis versus and right to shelter is also a part of right to life and personal liberty. Right. Then, very recently, the Supreme Court, in its landmark judgment of K.S. Puttaswamy versus Union of India, it said that right to privacy is also a part of this right to life and personal liberty. Then, in the Bandhua Mukti Morcha case of 1997, the Supreme Court said that the right to health is also a part of right to life and personal liberty, which was in line with the Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948, to which India is also a signatory. So we see that over the years, the Supreme Court has expanded the Article 21, right to life and personal liberty. It's a very, very important article as of now. Then moving on, we are going to discuss Article 22 of the Constitution, which again are protection in respect of arrests, which talks that if a person is arrested, then that person has to be presented before the magistrate within 24 hours. Then it lists out all the conditions of preventive detention, in what circumstances preventive detention is legal, and then after 3 months preventive detention, a certain committee has to be formed to analyze whether the preventive detention of a certain person can continue or not. Then Article 23 we are going to discuss, which is prohibition of trafficking in human, and also that is prohibition of human trafficking and forced labor. Then Article 24 we are going to discuss, which is the prohibition of employment of children as workers in factories. And we're also going to discuss, as part of fundamental rights, Article 21A, that we are going to discuss, which is right to education. It's now a fundamental right after the 86th constitutional amendment of 2002. And many landmarks judgments of the Supreme Court have also played a very crucial role in a way, influencing the union government to create a fundamental right to education. One such important judgment was the Mohini Jain versus State of Karnataka case of 1989. This was regarding right to education. That we are going to do. Then we are going to do Article 25, which is freedom of practice and propagation of religion, right? Freedom of profession, practice, free profession, practice, and propagation. So of religion, that we are going to do. But yes, this Article 25, which is regarding freedom of practice and free profession and propagation of religion, that says that this should be within the limits of public order, health, and morality. So within the limits of public order, health, and morality, all religions in our country, they have the freedom of practice and profession, as well as free propagation of religion throughout the country, but within the limits of public order, health, and morality. Then we are going to study Article 26, which gives the different religions of our country the right to administer and establish institutions, charitable institutions, right? Again, within the limit of public order, health, and morality. Then we are going to discuss Article 27, which says that for the propagation of religion and for the practice of religion, no person has to pay any taxes to the union, right? So earlier, what was there during the Mughal era, that the jizya tax was there. The Hindus, they had to pay a jizya tax to the Mughal emperors in order to practice and profess their religion. So no such tax would be applied for practicing or propagating religion. That Article 27 says. Then Article 28 we are going to discuss, which says that no religious instruction shall be imparted in any government institution, and no one shall be forced to take part in any religious instruction, right, in any government funded institution. Then Article 29, which is regarding the protection of the cultural rights of the linguistic cultural minorities. So the right of the minorities to protect their language and their culture and their script. Article 29 gives them that. Then we are going to discuss in this fundamental rights Article 30, which is the right of religious minorities and different religions to establish and administer educational institutions. And also the second part of Article 30 says that no one should be denied admission to any educational institution on the basis of caste. Right? No one shall be discriminated on the basis of caste. However, this does not mean that the weaker sections, the special provisions shall not be made for them. So the Madras High Court in its Champakam Dorai Rajan case of 1951, it said that affirmative action policies of the government, they are in violation of the second clause of Article 30. And that is why this, the Union government in its first Amendment Act, it inserted a special provision in Article 16, which is right to equality of opportunity, which said that although Article 30 clause 2 is there, that no one shall be discriminated on the basis of caste in matters of admission to educational institutions. But the Union government has the right to make special provisions, that is affirmative action, in favor of the weaker sections, the SCs, the STs, the OBCs. So that was there. That we are going to study. Then we are going to study Article 31, which includes very important clauses like the Article 31A and Article 31B, which basically is the 9th schedule that was inserted through the First Amendment Act to protect the land reform laws that were being implemented by the government to abolish zamindari and to bring in a new order based on socio-economic justice. So to protect those laws from judicial scrutiny, 9th schedule was inserted in the Constitution, Article 31A and Article 31B. However, the Supreme Court in its Kesavananda Bharati judgment and of 1973 and I.R. Coelho judgment, it made it clear that articles in the 9th schedule are also subject to judicial review. Right, and Article 31C is also there, which says that certain directive principles which are contained in Article 39, they shall be given priority over fundamental rights. Then, so these things we are going to do. Then Article 32, which is the most important fundamental right, and Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the chairman of the drafting committee and India's first law minister, he called Article 32 as the heart of the Constitution, the cornerstone of the Constitution. Why? Because it provides the citizen certain rights that if their fundamental rights are violated, so it is the right to constitutional remedies. If the fundamental rights of the citizens are violated, then they can directly approach the Supreme Court. And Article 32 also contains the writ jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, writ to prohibition, writ of mandamus, certiorari, quo warranto, right? So it's very important that we're going to discuss. Article 33 we are going to discuss, which is regarding the implementation of fundamental rights, certain limitations on fundamental rights regarding armed forces personnel. Then Article 34 we are going to discuss, which is regarding the situation of fundamental rights during the martial law, implementation of martial law. So all these things we are going to discuss. And also we are going to discuss Article 359, which talks about how Article 19 and 20 are going to operate during the time of emergency. So these are the things that we are going to discuss. Then moving on, we shall be discussing the directive principles of state policy, which are very important. Although they are not legally justiciable, they cannot be enforced by any court. So Article 37 clearly says that directive principles of state policy, they cannot be enforced by any judiciary. However, they shall act as a guide to in the formulation of government policies. And Article 36, it says that only the Union Parliament can make laws regarding the directive principles, regarding implementing the directive principles. Then Article 38, it talks about how groups of people, as well as men and women in the country, they should have equal wage for equal work. Article 39 echoes the same, that men and women, they should be paid equal wage for equal work. And Article 39 also says that the operation of the Indian economy should not lead to the accumulation of means of production, should not lead to the concentration of means of production in a few hands, or to the it should not cause it should not operate in such a way that it would lead to common detriment, right? Then Article 39 also says that children, they should be protected against moral and material abandonment. Article 39 also says that no one should be forced to enter into such vocations which are unsuitable to their age or strength due to poverty. So then we are going to discuss as part of directive principles of state policy, Article 40, which is a Gandhian directive principle, and which says that, which is about the organization of panchayats at the village level and giving them autonomy and powers, which was done through the 73rd Amendment in 1992, right? Article 243. Then we are going to discuss Article 241, which is regarding right to work, education, and public assistance in certain cases. So those people who are due to old age and sickness, they're not able to work, they shall be given public assistance according to Article 41. Then we are also going to discuss Article 39A, which was inserted by the 42nd Amendment, which is about providing free legal aid to the disadvantaged and underserved sections of the population. Then we are also going to discuss Article 42, which is about maternity relief and just and humane treatment of workers. We are also going to discuss Article 42A, right? So we are, after 42, we are going to discuss Article 42A, which is regarding the involvement of workers in the management of industries. Then we are going to discuss Article 43, which talks about a minimum living wage, giving a minimum living wage to the workers, and also to ensure that their full enjoyment of leisure is there. And also we are going to discuss, and also it says that they should be given full educational and social and cultural opportunities. And the second part of Article 43 is a Gandhian directive principles, which entrusts upon this Indian state a responsibility to organize cottage industries either on a cooperative or individual basis in rural India. Then Article 43A is regarding the participation of workers in the management of industries. This was inserted by the 42nd Amendment of 1976. Then we are going to discuss Article 43B, which is regarding the rights that were given to cooperatives, right, as per the 97th Amendment of 2013. Then we are going to discuss the Article 44, which is regarding the Uniform Civil Code. Then we are going to discuss Article 45, which again is regarding right to education. So Article 45, it entrusts upon the state that it should ensure that parent and guardians, they are providing opportunities for education to their child or their ward between the age of 6 and 14 years. Then Article 47, we are going to discuss as part of directive principles, which basically says that Article 47, it basically says that so after Article 45, we are going to discuss Article 46, which basically says that the state should take steps to ensure the welfare of scheduled castes and scheduled tribe communities, as also to ensure their participation in educational institutions as well as in public employment. Then Article 47 we are going to discuss, which entrusts upon the state a responsibility to promote and improve the health care of the country and the health of its citizens, and also to raise the levels of nutrition, and also to prohibit the consumption of intoxicating substances except for medicinal purposes. Then Article 48 we are going to discuss, which entrusts upon the state a responsibility to Article 48, which is a part of the directive principles of state policy. It entrusts upon the state a responsibility to organize agriculture and animal husbandry on modern and scientific lines. And this article, it also entrusts upon the state a responsibility to prevent cow slaughter as well as the slaughter of milch and milch cattle, right? That we are going to discuss as part of the fundamental rights. Then we are also going to discuss the Article 48A, which entrusts upon the state. This was inserted by the 42nd Amendment, Article 48A, So this was inserted by the 42nd Amendment of 1976. It entrusts upon the state a responsibility to protect and improve the natural environment and wildlife. And this Wildlife Protection Act was also inserted. So of 1972. So then we are going to discuss the Article 49, which talks about the responsibility of the state to protect monuments and of cultural and historical importance, right? And then we are going to discuss Article 50, which is about separation of executive and judiciary in terms of public services of the state. Then Article 51 is very important, which forms a cornerstone of India's foreign policy, very much linked to the Panchsheel policy. So Article 51, it says that the state should promote international peace and security and maintain just and honorable relations between nations. And it should also foster, the Indian state should also foster respect for international norms and treaty organizations in the dealings of organized peoples with one another. And the last clause, it says that the Indian state should promote the resolution of international conflicts through arbitration. Then in this unit, we are also going to discuss the fundamental duties, which are 11 in number. The first one, it says that to abide by the Constitution and respect its ideals and institutions. The second fundamental duties, it says that to cherish and follow the noble ideals which inspired our national struggle for freedom. The third fundamental duty, it says that to uphold and protect the sovereignty, unity, and integrity of India. The fourth fundamental duty, it says that to defend the country and render national service when called upon to do so. The fifth fundamental duty, it says that to promote harmony and the spirit of common brotherhood amongst all the people of India, transcending linguistic, religious, and sectional or regional diversities, and to renounce practices derogatory to the dignity of women. Then the sixth fundamental duty we are going to discuss, which is about to value and preserve the rich heritage of our composite culture. The seventh fundamental duty is to protect and improve the natural environment, including forests, lakes, rivers, and wildlife, and to have compassion for all living creatures. The eighth fundamental duty, it says to develop the spirit of to develop the scientific temper, humanism, and the spirit of inquiry and reform. That we are going to discuss. This is the eighth fundamental duty. The ninth fundamental duty is about to safeguard public property and abjure violence. The 10th fundamental duty, which we are going to discuss, is to strive for excellence in all spheres of individual and collective activity, so that the nation constantly rises to higher levels of endeavors and achievement. And the 11th fundamental duty, which we are going to discuss, which was inserted by the 86th amendment to the Indian Constitution by the Atal Bihari Vajpayee-led NDA government in 2002. It is one who is a parent or a guardian to provide opportunities for education to his child, or as and politics. We are going to discuss caste, class, and tribe as part of Unit 10. Then, as part of Unit 11, we are going to discuss gender. As part of Unit 12, we are going to discuss workers and farmers. And in Block 5, which is pertaining to religion and politics, we are going to first discuss secularism. And in the 14th unit, we are going to discuss communism. The final unit, that is the 6th unit pertaining to parties and party system in India, is pertaining. It includes the Unit 15, in which we are going to discuss the parties and party system in India. So, beginning with the first unit, which is liberal approach to Indian politics. So, in liberal perspective, politics is viewed in terms of political structures and political processes or political system. So, the prime concern of liberal perspective is to study consensus or conflict management within a political system. So, unlike the Marxist perspective, liberal perspective does not focus on class relations, nor does it use the concept of state. Rather, the liberal perspective, it prefers to use political system in place of the state, and it prefers to focus on the consensus building rather than class relations or class conflict within a political system. So the liberal perspective, it prefers to use the term political system and to explain how a system maintains itself by management of conflict or reaching consensus. So in fact, liberal perspective to study politics is a non-Marxist perspective, and it should not be confused with liberalism. So liberal perspective to Indian politics is a variant of structural functional approach of Gabriel Almond, right, or systemic approach. So when we use the terms liberal according to liberalism, it mainly denotes to freedom, whether it is freedom of individual, community, or group. So liberalism, it basically is based on a commitment to individual freedom, tolerance, as well as consent. So it is basically based on integrity, impartiality, non-partisanship, objectivity, empathy, tolerance, and compassion. So the liberalism, it came into existence as an outcome of protest against the hierarchical and privileged authority and monarchy in England and in Europe. So the main purpose of this protest was to achieve liberty of the individual and to challenge the authority of the state. So now let us discuss some of the core elements of the liberal approach. So the first core element is institutions. So it focuses on political system and not the state. So until Theda Skopkal underlined the need for bringing the state back in the mid 1980s, under the influence of liberal approach as a variant of structural functional approach, the liberal approach, it preferred to use the term political system rather than the state for the polity of a country. So the system, liberal system, it consists of a certain institutions or structures such as political parties, interest groups, or civil society organizations. So these structures and institutions, they interact with social structures such as caste, language, religion, region, tribe, etc. And while interacting with each other, they perform certain functions. Or due to their interaction, certain processes occur where different components of an organization, they conflict and cooperate and reach a consensus. So consequently, a system or institution, it maintains itself. And political institutions, they generally include political parties, pressure groups, legislature, and executive. So indeed, this approach, it dominated the study of Indian politics for around 4 decades from the 1950s. Now let us discuss the second core element of the liberal approach pertaining to processes. So among the processes which this approach studies are the functions which are performed by different institutions and organizations. So these are conceptualized. What are the functions which are performed by these institutions and organizations? They are political mobilization, interest articulation, as well as interest aggregation. So political mobilization, interest articulation, and interest aggregation. These are the processes that are performed by the institutions which the liberal approach seeks to study. Political mobilization, interest articulation, and interest aggregation. So with reference to progress of democracy, the processes are also referred to as democratization, which basically lead to deepening and consolidation of democracy. So these processes, that is political mobilization, interest articulation, and interest aggregation, they basically lead to democratization. And democratization, it entails deepening and consolidation of democracy in a certain country or a certain society. So the liberal approach, it views politicization of people as democratization through electoral mobilization and political participation. So by the late 1960s, the process of democratization, it had begun to affect the lower social orders and has been continuing since then. So consequently, India's traditional and semi-feudal society, it moved towards liberty and equality. And furthermore, different social and political movements of the 1970s and 80s, as well as the emergence of institutions of civil society and multiculturalism, they have promoted democratization of the country and different institutions in India. So Yogendra Yadav, he termed it as the second democratic upsurge. Now, if we talk about values, the third core element of liberal approach, it includes values. That is liberty, human rights, and equalities. And it is more about individual or community rights. And it's the duty of the state to provide protection to the vulnerable sections, the ethnic groups, scheduled tribes, and minorities. So just as we have discussed earlier in the class, this duty is being done by the Indian state also, and it is entrusted upon it by the Constitution of India as well, Article 29, which talks about protection of the language, script, and culture of the minorities, as well as Article 45, which talks about ensuring the welfare of the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes and their participation in public services and educational institutions. Right, Article 16, which talks about this only, about the duty of the state to provide protection to the vulnerable sections in terms of equality of opportunity. Right, Article 14, it talks about right to equality. Article 15, it entails upon the state a responsibility to prohibit discrimination on the basis of religion, race, caste, place of birth, right, gender. So all these things are there. And also Article 344, that is the 8th schedule, it includes 22 languages which are basically scheduled languages in the Constitution to protect the linguistic rights of the ethnic groups as well. Right, Article 335, which tells the state that it is the responsibility of the state to guarantee the claims of the scheduled tribes and the scheduled castes in the public services, right? And also Article 330, which reserves seats for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in proportion of their population, and Article 332, which reserves seats in the state legislatures for the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribes in proportion of their population. Article 330, it reserves seats for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in the House of the People, that is the Lok Sabha, in proportion of their population. Right, then Article 338 is there. All these articles are there for the protection of the vulnerable sections, scheduled tribes and minorities. Article 338, which is about the National Scheduled Caste Commission, which has the powers of a civil court. It is a quasi-judicial body, right, to ensure the welfare of the scheduled caste community. Then Article 338A is there, the National Commission for Scheduled Tribes, which also has the responsibility to ensure the welfare of the scheduled tribe community and to take action if atrocities are committed against them. So that is why both these National Commission for Scheduled Castes and National Commission for Scheduled Tribes, both of them have quasi-judicial powers of a civil court. And the 103rd Amendment, it also created the so the 102nd Amendment, it also created the National Commission for Backward Castes, right? It also gave them constitutional recognition, and Article 338B was inserted to ensure the welfare of the socially and educationally backward castes and also prevent atrocities against them. So this body has also been entrusted with quasi-judicial powers of a civil court. Then we have Article 339, which gives the right to the president to form a commission to inquire into the status of the scheduled caste community. Article 340 is there, which gives the power to the President of India to form a commission to inquire into the status and welfare of the other backward castes or the socially and educationally backward castes, right? Then Article 341 is there, which is regarding the scheduled caste. Article 342 is there, which is regarding the scheduled tribes. It gives them all the powers, right? And it talks about the protection of their rights and their welfare, Article 341 and 342, and also to prevent atrocities against them, right? Then there is Article 244 in the Constitution, which includes the 5th schedule and the 6th schedule, right? Which is regarding the protection of the rights of the scheduled tribe. So these scheduled areas, that have been created, they have been given certain autonomy. Is in Assam, in Meghalaya, in Tripura, and in Mizoram, and the rest of the states, the fifth schedule has been created. Also, the Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas Act 1996, that has also been inserted to ensure the participation of the tribal communities in local governance, right? To ensure autonomy in terms of local governance, and the state government, it has to take the recommendation of the panchayats in these scheduled areas, or the village councils, before implementing any developmental project in those areas. And the governor of the state has to submit report to the president of India regarding the status of these communities, the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes community, the scheduled tribe communities, especially in the article 244 fifth schedule and sixth schedule areas. So this Panchayat Extension to Scheduled Areas Act of 1996, it has worked wonders, and it has also led to an increase, a 3% increase in the tree canopies. So it has led to, in a way, it has been a positive step in protecting the environment, right? In helping the helping India to achieve its nationally determined contribution and its sustainable development goals. So also there is the Forest Rights Act of 2005, right? That has also been created by the state to provide protection to the scheduled tribe community, right? So that they have been given the right to collect non-forest produce from the forest areas, right? By the Forest Rights Act of 2005. And the British laws that were discriminatory against the tribal communities didn't allow them to enter the forests. Those were also done away with, right, by the Forest Rights Act of 2005. So these are some of the rights, acts that have been enacted for the protection of the vulnerable sections, ethnic groups, scheduled tribes, and minorities by the state in India. So this also reflects the liberal values of the state. Then, however, liberal approach, it advocates individual rights and freedom, but it also advocates protection of communities, especially their language, culture, and script, which is given in Article 29 of the Fundamental Rights of the Indian Constitution. That is. So, liberal approach to study politics. If we talk about the liberal approach to study Indian politics, it basically is a variant of the systemic or structural functional approach. So, liberal approach, when applied to study Indian politics, it can also be called systemic approach. And systemic approach, it emerged out of a broad movement in social sciences known as the behavioral movement, which took place in the post-World War II period. And David Easton was one of the torch bearers of this behavioral movement. So it wanted to make political science pure science. It wanted to make the methodologies of political science based on scientific observations, as well as empirical data, right? So it wanted to take political science away from the normative side to the empirical side. So systems approach was introduced by David Easton and James Coleman to study political systems in the developing countries in 1950s and 1960s. This framework also came to be known as the modernization or development framework. So development framework's main purpose was to study development of modern political institutions in the developing societies. And the notion of development, according to this perspective, was different from economists' notion of development. So according to the economists, development generally means growth rate or development of infrastructure. For political scientists influenced by the behavioral movement, it means development of modern political institutions. And its main focus has been to see political institutions or organizations' development maintain themselves by reaching consensus within the factions of organization. So Rajni Kothari's Politics in India is one of the most important examples to study politics at India level. He advocates that the political system is resilient and it survives, and his book was mainly followed by the structural functional approach. And using this approach, Rajni Kothari, he categorized the Congress party of the 1950s and 1960s as the Congress system. So the 1950s, 1960s era was called as the era of Congress dominance. So C.B. Bhamri, he critiqued Rajni Kothari's approach to study Indian politics in a review of Kothari's book Politics in India. So in this approach, the political system, it comprises of political institutions, structures and processes, and these three attributes they keep interacting, conflicting and adjusting with one another, balancing and counterbalancing to themselves. Okay. So in such a situation, the political system maintains, it does not break down. So that is why Rajni Kothari called the Congress system that it works like a thermostat. It absorbs everything and it maintains a constant temperature. Right. So during the initial period of independence, many political scientists have followed this approach to study Indian politics. So according to C.B. Bhamri, Kothari's framework, it prohibits raising basic questions in Indian politics, such as the class character of the state, location and distribution of political power, as well as the role of imperialism. So in this framework, economic aspects are also missing, according to C.B. Bhamri. So Indian politics has been studied without reference of role of the trade unions, the big industrial houses, as well as the lobbies of the rich farmers and landless peasants. So C.B. Bhamri further adds that Kothari's model of Indian democracy is similar to that of Robert Dahl, which says that society is plural and democratic government operates like a market, and this market is subject to all sorts of pulls and pressure. So C.B. Bhamri compares Rajni Kothari's model of Indian democracy to Robert Dahl's theory of pluralism. So C.P. Bhamri further underlines that this limitation in Kothari's analysis is due to the limitation of systematic or liberal approach. So this approach does not look at the class conflict as a process of social change. Rather, it focuses on how a system maintains itself or a consensus within its conflicting units. In response of C.B. Bhamri's critique, Rajni Kothari suggests that his book is not based on Marxist approach to politics or American brand of functionalist approach. He has used Indian model, which is different from both Marxist and capitalist. That is what Rajni Kothari said. So Rajni Kothari also emphasized that there are two styles of theoretical analysis, that is polar and pluralistic. So Rajni Kothari has used pluralistic analysis to study state politics. So during the 1970s, several individual scholars, in case of studies of individual state or a group of states, they used the systemic framework, and they also included subsystem of state politics, such as political parties, caste, religion, language, leadership, election, and pressure groups. So study of the Congress party presented the most relevant example of applying liberal approach to study party as a system. So Richard Sisson and Paul Brass, they studied the Congress party in Rajasthan and Uttar Pradesh respectively. However, by the end of the 1970s, transformation of the society changed the character and nature of the state. So land reforms, green revolutions and welfare policies, they were largely responsible for such changes. But the liberal approach was unable to reflect these changes in the study of Indian politics. So Iqbal Narayan, he applied this framework to analyze the state politics in India. So the liberal approach has undergone transformation after the 1970s, and the liberal approach, it can no longer be said to be averse to using the concept of the state instead of political system. So following the return of the state in the 1980s, according to Zoya Hassan, so she observes that there was a return of the state in the 1980s. So when Indira Gandhi, she came back to power, she stormed back to power in 1980s, and many people said that it was a restoration of the Congress system. So following the return of the state in the 1980s, as Zoya Hassan observes, that a section of literature, it focused on the study of the state. So the liberal approach is no longer averse to using the concept of state instead of political system. So in this literature, unlike the classical Marxian perspective, which views the state as an agent of the propertied class, the state has been viewed as an autonomous institution. So state was not an agent of classes or groups. Rather, it functions independently of and in the interest of all groups and classes. So this approach is called the statist approach that Zoya Hassan brought forth. But there are limitations of statist approach because it gives insufficient importance to the role of diverse groups in Indian society. Right. So in this statist approach literature, unlike the classical Marxian perspective, which views the state as an agent of the propertied classes, the state has been viewed as an autonomous institution, and so it was argued that the state was not an agent of classes or groups. Rather, the state functions independently of and in the interest of all groups and classes. Now we shall discuss the changing scope of liberal approach. So since the 1950s, the liberal approach has changed in the following ways. So first of all, there has been a convergence between its elements of the 1950s, 60s, and some elements of Marxian approach. So it is no longer averse to using the concept of state, and it studies the activities which aim to achieve social change or which are concerned with basic democratic values, as well as people's mobilization through civil society organizations, multiculturalism, social capital in electoral politics. So civil society has emerged as a very important element of studying Indian government and politics. So the core element of the liberal approach is individual freedom. But when we talk about a nation or a state, it also includes community, as well as ethnic groups, marginalized sections, and protecting the rights of the marginalized sections, which I have discussed in detail in today's class. So in a democratic country like India, we have certain fundamental rights, and these fundamental rights, they safeguard the basic rights and provide protection to the citizen and to the community. However, there are many cases where states have failed to provide or protect their citizens or institutions. So the liberal approach, it views the role of civil society organizations in relation to democratic rights of individuals. So civil society organizations are different from civil society. As Neera Chandhok explains, civil society is a space that exists between the family and the state. And in this space, the civil society organizations, they basically operate. So the liberal approach, it can help to explain the role of these organizations in democratization of the society or protection of the rights of individuals and groups in the society. That is, what are these rights? Rights of free expression, which is given in Article 19. Freedom to form associations, again given in Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause D. Freedom to dissent, freedom to generate as well as disseminate public opinion. So all these things are there. It also helps us to explain the relationship between the state and the society. Now let us discuss multiculturalism. So liberal approach, it recognizes the rights of not only individuals but also groups. So liberal approach recognizes group rights as well. And in a diverse society, recognition of the rights of diverse groups. What are these rights? The right to representation, which has been given, which has been by our constitution, by Article 335, by Article 330 and 332 to the scheduled castes and the scheduled tribe communities in the parliament, that is the Lok Sabha and the state legislative assembly respectively. So in our constitution, we can see these multiculturalist values being reflected. Right. So in a diverse society, recognition of rights of different groups, and recently the 106th constitutional amendment, which reserved 33% of the seats for the women, the Nari Shakti Adhiniyam, that was also a reflection of this approach. Right. So in a diverse society, recognitions of rights of diverse groups. What are these rights? Rights to representation and distributive justice is indicative of multiculturalism. So distributive justice is also enshrined in our constitution in Article 38, 39, Article 16, right, Article 335. So all these are reflections of multiculturalism in our constitution. So if we talk about so Bhikkhu Parekh, he explains that no multicultural society can or should ignore the demands of diversity. And multiculturalism, it goes beyond the abstracted individual liberal individualism, and it assumes that human beings are culturally embedded. So in a way, it takes cue from communitarianism, right? Rather than considering the individual as abstract and completely detached from the society, it says that the individual is embedded, and it means that they grow up and live within a culturally structured world. So they organize their lives and social relations in terms of a culturally derived system of meaning and significance. So these cultural communities, they generally demand various kinds of rights to maintain their collective identity, and such rights are called group, collective, or communal rights. So Mahajan states that multiculturalism is concerned with the issue of equality, and it is concerned with the question if different communities are living peacefully together as equals in the public arena. So she states that multiculturalism is different from pluralism or diversity. While pluralism or diversity denotes just coexistence of different groups in the society, but not whether they are related to democratic pursuits or not. That is not being discussed by pluralism or diversity, because it just talks about coexistence of different groups, but not about that whether they are engaged in democratic pursuits or not. But multiculturalism, when we talk about how is multiculturalism different from pluralism or diversity, multiculturalism, it not only talks about coexistence of different groups, but it is necessarily associated with democracy. So different groups can coexist together in an autocratic setup also, in an autocratic society as well, in an autocratic polity as well. There are many nations in the world where different groups and ethnic groups and communities, they are coexisting, but there is no democratic setup. There is a monarchical or dictatorial system or dictatorial type of polity, autocratic polity, right? Unitarian polity. But multiculturalism is necessarily associated with democracy. So multiculturalism, it either guarantees or attempts to provide cultural rights of religious and linguistic minority communities to preserve their culture, language, and script, as well as other rights. So now let us discuss social capital, another important concept. So since the 1990s, the concept of social capital has been used to explain the nature of relations among communities. So social capital is indicative of the existence of civil society and democracy. So this concept is taken from Tocquevillian notion of associations, and Italian political scientist Robert Putnam used this in his book Making Democracy Work: Civic Traditions in Modern Italy. So Alexis de Tocqueville, who was an American scholar, who was a French scholar who commented on American politics. So from his notion of associations, the concept of social capital has been taken, and Italian political scientist Robert Putnam used this concept in his book Making Democracy Work: Civic Traditions in Modern Italy. So social capital denotes the existence of networking among people in a group or community who share common values and trust each other. So the rise of new social movements, women's movements, environmentalist movements, civil liberties, and human rights movements. So the social capital is also related to the rise of new social movements, civil societies, and realization of the importance of study as well as substantive democracy. It has added to the significance of this perspective. So Ashutosh Varshney's book, Ethnic Conflict and Civic Life, Hindus and Muslims in India, in the study of ethnic riots in 6 cities of India, has been influenced by the Tocquevillian tradition. Now, finally, we are going to discuss the convergence of approaches. So, study of politics in India in post-independent India has been basically studied by two opposite approaches, non-Marxist and Marxist, and these two approaches have traditionally been exclusive to each other. However, both these frameworks are not as rigid since the 1980s as they were earlier. So there is convergence between them in terms. So they use terms such as caste, such as state, political system, or state interchangeably and address similar kind of issues. And since the 1980s, there has been a convergence of liberal and Marxist approach. So such convergence is visible in the writings of scholars such as Francine Frankel, Lloyd and Susan Rudolph, and Pranab Bardhan. So Francine Frankel looks at the historical contradictions between transformative goals of development planning and the conservative forces of institutional democratic politics and makes a distinction between political and social issues. Pranab Bardhan, who is a neo-Marxist scholar, contends that in India, the state is an autonomous actor which plays an important role in shaping and molding power relations among classes. And according to Rudolph and Rudolph, Indian state is a centrist state and Indian politics is devoid of class politics and it functions as a third actor between capital and labor, and the Indian state functions between demand polity and command polity according to Rudolph and Rudolph. And in the demand politics, the state has to deal with the pressure of various demand groups such as students and farmers. So in today's class, we have discussed the liberal perspective. In the next class, we are going to discuss the Marxian and the Gandhian perspective to study Indian politics. So we are done with the liberal perspective. We have discussed its core elements and we have discussed its values and the concept of civil society, social culture, all these things we have discussed. So in the next class, we will be discussing Marxist and Gandhian approaches. Thank you so much.